Good afternoon, fellow engineers. Wherever you are, good afternoon, good evening. Sa gobyernong tapat, angat buhay lahat. This has been a call, our cry, our clamor. We call for an honest government. We demand one for the Philippines. We cry for it as we gather in our own cities and provinces nationwide, and even in some parts abroad. We clamor for it. We dream of a Philippines led by an honest government, all in the hope that everyone will rise from our respective lowest points. But then I ask you, my fellow engineers, young and old, I ask you as a private citizen, as a Filipino citizen, how can you help form an honest government? How can you strengthen its foundation and ensure that this stays upright amidst the ravages of time and external elements? This afternoon, I hope to share with you what I have learned in my 76 years as a Filipino, which includes 50 plus years as a civil engineer. Let me sum up in 4 letters. Of course, Lenny. L-E-N-I, Lenny. Let us start with L. We are now in our 9th talk in this webinar series, lUGAW ng Kaalaman, organized by Civil Engineers for Lenny or CE4L. We engineers are being fond of numbers really. You may have noted that our 9th talk falls on the 9th day of the month. It would have been triple nines had it been September instead of April. A quick search on the significance of number 9 led me to links relating to magic, patience and tranquility, completion and finality, and to wisdom and responsibility, with its ultimate goal of serving humanity. I repeat, with its ultimate goal of serving humanity. That last one matches our letter L. As we gather this 9th talk, we celebrate Araw ng Kagitingan. We are learning leaders and leading learners. We are brave enough to admit that we do not know everything, and thus we seek wisdom with each other. We acknowledge that we are responsible of our country's future, and thus we gather to partake of the lUGAW of KAALAMAN. We have been doing this webinar series, whether as speakers or audience or even organizers, because we dream of a better Philippines. As engineers, whether student engineers, newbies, or veterans, we are leaders of our respective teams. As leaders, we never stop learning. In the same manner, we continue to lead our team towards continuous learning. We are servant leaders. And the best image of servant leader that come to my mind, a timely one as the Holy Week starts tomorrow, is that of Jesus washing the feet of his apostles during the Last Supper. As leaders, we are not the boss. We lead to serve our team, our constituents, our colleagues, our family, friends, and even foes. We are learners. As learners for life, we try to lead honorably, in our thoughts, our words, and in our deeds. One way to be learning leaders and leading learners is by participating in circles of discernment, like what we are doing now. Through this webinar series, we have been honing our discernment process, not only to guide us for the May 9 elections, but to guide us in our calling as engineers as well. Next, we have the letter E. E for ethical engineers. To be honorable engineers, we have to be ethical engineers. We have to be ethical in our practice. We have to be. And to guide us, we have the Civil Engineers Code of Ethics. I will share with you several fundamental principles which I got from Engineer Christian Crieta, a professional engineer. There are 4 of them. The first one is using their knowledge and skill for the enhancement of human welfare and the environment. Number 2, being honest and impartial and serving with fidelity the public, their employers, employees, and clients, striving to increase the competence and prestige of the civil engineering profession. And 4th and last, supporting the professional and technical societies of their disciplines. These are 4 straightforward code of honor for civil engineers, and I don't think I would delve on it further. And then to this, there are also several instances which we may consider unprofessional and inconsistent with honorable and dignified bearing for any registered civil engineer. And the same Engineer Crieta enumerated 8 of these. Number 1, to act for his clients in professional matters other than a faithful agent or trustee, or to accept any remuneration other than his stated charges for services. Number 2, to attempt to injure falsely or maliciously, directly or indirectly, the professional reputation, prospects, or business of another engineer. The third one is to attempt to supplant another engineer after definite steps have been taken towards his employment. The 4th one is to compete with another engineer for employment on the basis of his professional charges by reducing his usual charges and in this manner attempting to underbid after being informed of the charges named by another. The 5th one is to review the work of another engineer for the same client, except with the knowledge or consent of such engineer, or unless the connection of such engineer with the work has been terminated. To advertise, that's number 6, to advertise in self-laudatory language or in any other manner derogatory to the dignity of the profession. And number 7, to use advantages of a salaried position to compete unfairly with engineers in private practice. And last but not the least, number 8, to act in any manner or engage in any practice which will tend to bring discredit on the honor or dignity of the engineering profession. Again, all these 8 unsatisfactory behavior unethical behavior are all self-explanatory. Maybe we have had some experiences before on some of these, and surely we have learned from out of these experiences. Naghahanap tayo ng gobyernong tapat, kaya't nararapat lamang na tayo rin mismo ay maging tapat. Amen? The third one, N. I like this one. Nurturing nature. As engineers, we have the brains for numbers and other technical terms. As honorable engineers, we have the proper ethics in our practice. And to be responsible engineers, we also have to have a nurturing nature. They say that there is a common dichotomy about nature versus nurture. But when we think about it, these two concepts actually complement each other. Thus, let it be our nature be nurturing, to be caring. And among those that we nurture, let nature be one of them, if not the top one. When I say nature, I mean the environment, or Mother Earth, as we call it in the community. And Mother Earth is our common home. Let me just share with you, or let's go back in time. Sometime in November 2013, Super Typhoon Yolanda or Haiyan hit the Philippines. Yolanda packed more than 300 kilometers per hour winds, the greatest in recorded history then. It brought death and devastation along its path. The destruction and power of Yolanda were covered in detail by the international press, and most knowledgeable people were awed and shivered when scientists called this event the new normal. Wow, new normal na pala yun. Grabe. During the same time, the same year, 2013, Pope Francis was just installed to the papacy, and so noticed the suffering of our people, mostly in Leyte and Samar. Thereafter, he made the solemn promise to visit our country to be with his flock there. He did come in early 2015. After this visit, he came up with his second encyclical called the Laudato Si. That is 7 years ago to the date, almost to the date, on May 15, 2015. It has the subtitle, On Care for a Common Home. Pope Francis issued his papal encyclical Laudato Si, which means in Italian, praise be to you. And he called to all Christians and people of goodwill to care for our common home, Mother Earth. The encyclical explains in detail how people ought to take care of the environment. And so 2 years later, in 2017, the Pope urged all citizens of the world to sign a pledge to care for Mother Earth by doing 3 things. Number 1, pray for and with creation. Number 2, live more simply. And number 3, advocate to protect our common home. He also urged mankind to listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Ang sabi nga nila, yung mga bagyo na yan, yung mga drought na yan, ang madaling, ang tinatamaan kadalasan ay ang mga nasalaylayan at ang ating kalikasan. As engineers, as individuals, as responsible Filipino citizens, what can we do to nurture nature? Let me just share with you the 4S project that our community, Couples for Christ, is now doing nationwide and in other parts of the world, 131 countries where we have members. We call it the 4S project. These are doable things at home by the family. Number 1, S for stewardship, caretaker of the environment. Why stewardship? As a Christians, we are told that man was created in the image of God and has a special purpose for this. As part of creation and as top of the line, he was held responsible of being a steward, the caretaker of all creation. Man included, especially yung mga nasa laylayan. They say that the Laudato Si is a 1-semester course. So, medyo malalim ito. And one must live out Laudato Si to be able really to care for the environment. The next S is segregation for proper waste management. We have a law, solid waste management, and we have to do it. We have to do it. We have to segregate the biodegradable from the non-biodegradable, including the toxic ones. So at home, we teach our members, even our children, to segregate. Yung mga basura sa kitchen ay kinocompose para gawing pataba. Lahat ng miyembro ng community ay nagiging plantito at plantita, especially during the pandemic. So, nagkaroon ng home gardening bawat miyembro sa kanilang bahay. The third S is save. Save the law. Law is the acronym for land, air, and water. Ang daming basura sa kapaligiran. Ang sabi nga ni Pope Francis, the earth looks more and more like a pile of filth. Nagmumukhang basura na ang mundo dahil sa mga basurang itinatapon natin. Okay? We have that throw away culture. We almost change our cell phones to new ones whenever there is a new model. And what do you do with the old ones? You throw them away. Pero saan ang away? Hindi ba sa kalikasan? When you use plastics and you throw them away, saan papunta? Sa kanal papunta sa ilog, papunta sa ocean, hanggang malalaspag, maging micro at kakainin ng mga isda na siya namang kakainin natin afterwards. Anong mangyayari? Maaari tayo magkakasakit dahil sa ingestion ng microplastics. Yung air, A for air pollution. Sa paggamit natin ng coal, oil at saka gas, naging madumi ang air. Sa tubig, sinabi ko kanina, pagtatapon ng plastic at iba't iba pa, yung paggagamit ng fertilizers, mga synthetic detergents, napupoison din ng water. Ang hangin, nagiging madumi rin dahil sa ginagamit natin mga sasakyan. Pinakamadumi yung diesel-powered, next yung gas-powered. Ang pinakamaganda ay yung electric-powered. Isipin ninyo, tuwing kayo ay nagre-rehistro ng sasakyan, nagpapatest kayo, hindi ba? So normally, maski hindi na-tune up yung sasakyan mo, hindi papasa sa test, pero anong ginagawa? Pinapalusot. Tama ba yun? Hindi, di ba? So kailangan ipalinis mo muna yung sasakyan, bago mo ipatest. Nang sa gayon, you lessen pollution. Seed. Seed stands for tree planting and growing. We say that you plant the seed of the fruit you eat. So all those things we practice in this community, and hopefully we could share whatever experiences sa ating lahat, ng sa gayon ma-practice natin yung 4S sa sarili nating tahanan. Sa mga plastics, I just would like to show you that there are 8 companies that help us solve plastic pollution. And they are Pandacan Ecology Ministry, Plastic Flamingo, Basura sa Ayuda, The Plastic Solution, Popel Berotti, Wine the Recycling Company, Green Arts Builders, and My Basurero. Okay. The fourth one and the last, the letter I, indestructible integrity. To complete the package of learning leaders and leading learners who are ethical engineers and nurturing nature, we have to bind all these together and have an indestructible integrity. Good governance has become a byword in recent decades. And I share with you an article I read on good governance with the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Governance. UNESCOP defines governance as the process of decision-making and the process by which decisions are implemented or not implemented. Governance can be used in several contexts like corporate governance, international governance, national governance, and local governance. Government is one of the actors in governance. All actors other than government and the military are grouped together as part of the civil society. In rural areas, other actors may include influential landlords, associations of peasant farmers, cooperatives, NGOs, research institutes, religious leaders, finance institutions, political parties, the military, and others. In urban areas, the situation is more complex, with the urban elite, the urban middle class, and the urban poor. At the national level, Additional actors involved in governance include the media, lobbyists, international donors, multinational corporations, and others, with these playing a role in decision-making or influencing the decision-making process. Now, good governance. Good governance should be participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, follows the role of law. So if you want to have good governance, these 8 should be in. Participatory. Participation by both men and women is a key cornerstone of good governance. It could either be direct or through legitimate intermediate institutions or representatives. Participation needs to be informed and organized with freedom of association and expression on one hand and an organized civil society on the other hand. Consensus-oriented. Good governance requires mediation of the different interests in society to reach a broad consensus in society on what is in the best interest of the whole community and how this can be achieved. Accountable. Both the governmental institutions and the private sector and civil society organizations must be accountable to the public and to their institutional stakeholders. An organization or institution is accountable to those who will be affected by its decisions or actions. Transparent. Decisions taken and their enforcement should be done in a manner that follows rules and regulations. Information is freely available and directly accessible to those who will be affected by such decisions and their enforcement. Responsive. Institutions and processes should try to serve all stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. Effective and efficient. Good governance means that processes and institutions produce results that meet the needs of society while making the best use of resources at their disposal. The concept of efficiency in the context of good governance also covers the sustainable use of natural resources and the protection of the environment. Equitable and inclusive. A society's well-being depends on ensuring that all its members feel that they have a stake in it and do not feel excluded from the mainstream of society. Follows the rule of law. That's number 8. Good governance requires fair legal frameworks that are enforced impartially. It also requires full protection of human rights, particularly those of minorities. Therefore, for us to have an indestructible integrity, we can work and live to have the same characteristics as good governance, as we aim for better self-governance. Let our dealings be participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective and efficient, equitable and inclusive, and follow the role of law. And now, the challenge. As I end my talk, let me pose this question to you. Can we be learning leaders and leading learners by being ethical engineers with a nurturing nature and an indestructible integrity? Can we be a Lenny? This may be an ideal that is hard to attain, but it is not impossible. We can do our own part in our respective corners of the earth. We can be a Lenny. Thank you and good day.
Maraming salamat, Engineer ALCONCEL. So pagdating po sa eleksyon sa Mayo, let us plant the seed so that we'll be ensured of good governance by those people who have indestructible integrity. Pumili ng tama, pumili ng nararapat, pumili ng kandidatong alam nating sumusunod sa batas, alam nating transparent, alam nating accountable and responsible. Maraming salamat, Engineer ALCONCEL. With that, let me introduce the next video presentation. This week, BP Lenny and si Kiko ay bumisita dito sa amin sa Rizal. And our parish priests have shared yung sinabi ni BP Lenny sa aming obispo dito sa Antipolo. At ang sabi ni BP Lenny ay hindi trabaho ng iisang tao lamang ang pagbangon mula sa ating pagkakalugmok. Ito ay sa pamamagitan ng ating sama-samang pagkilos. As engineers, nakasanayan na nating magtrabaho bilang miyembro ng isang project team. Alam natin na magiging matagumpay ang isang project dahil sa sama-samang efforts ng iba't ibang building professionals na bumubuo ng project team. Ganun din ang kailangan ni BP Lenny sa pamamalakad ng bansa. Kailangan niya ang ka-teamwork, ang kanyang co-team captain sa pagpapatakbo ng gobyerno. Pakinggan po natin ang mensahe sa atin ni Kiko Pangilinan.
Magandang araw sa inyong lahat, mga katropa, mga engineers na nandyan sa ibang parte ng ating mundo, malalayong lugar. Mga katropa, Team Robredo, Pangilinan. Naalala ko nung nasa college ako, pag sinabi daw, CE, konting eng. ME, medyo eng. EE, electrical engineering, eng na eng. Tapos yung IE, ang biro, hindi eng. Biro lang. Sa lahat ng nagkakandidato para sa pagka-vice presidente, ang biro ko nga, ako lang ang may K. K-I-K-O, Kiko. Dalawang K pa nga. Gusto ko rin kayong kumustahin sa trabaho, mga hamong kinakaharap, mga buhay-buhay dyan sa Gulfo. Sana nasa mabuti kayong kalagayan kahit nalalayo sa inyong mga pamilya. Ang tatay ko, si Donato Pangilinan Jr., isa ring engineer. Civil engineer siya at Lodi. Talagang nakahat ng problema sa kanya may solusyon. Isa nga sa mga natutunan ko sa kanya na ang nation building parang pagtatayo rin ng bahay. Dapat from the ground up, matibay ang pundasyon. Kaya naman kami ni VP Lenny, inuuna ang mga nasa ilalim, mga nasa laylayan. Ganon talaga ang katropa. Walang iwanan. Ako, ang tinututukan ko at patuloy kong tututukan ay ang problema ng gutom at pagkain sa ating bansa. Laganap ang gutom. 95 na Pilipino, mga bata, araw-araw namamatay dahil sa kakulangan ng nutrisyon. Hindi ito katanggap-tanggap. Lalo na sa isang bansang napakayaman tulad ng Pilipinas. Kayong mga nagtatrabaho at naninirahan sa ibang bansa, nakikita nyo ang malaking pagkakaiba kung maayos ang pamumuno. At dahil sa gobyernong tapat, sabi nga, aangat ang buhay ng lahat. Kaya nga yung dati kong sana all, dapat all. Dapat all na. Higit sa lahat, kayo nakakalam niya dahil marami sa inyo nakakatira o nagpipirme sa mga lipunan na talagang progresibo, ika nga, at maayos ang serbisyo na binibigay ng gobyerno. Dapat all, sapat na ang kinikita para mayroong panggastos. Dapat all may hanap buhay. Dapat all ligtas sa sakit. Dapat all mayroong sariling tahanan. Dapat all hindi ginugutom. Dapat all hindi baon sa utang sa hirap ng buhay. Pagkain ang susunod kong assignment kung tayo palakarin sa susunod na administrasyon. Kapag inalagaan kasi natin ang ating mga magsasaka at mangingisda, dadami ang kanilang ani, dadami ang kanilang huli, dadami ang supply ng pagkain sa merkado, bababa na ang presyo. Pag sagana ang pagkain at sagana ang supply, o supply and demand, magiging abot kaya na ang presyo ng pagkain. At pag mas abot kaya na ang pagkain, sabi nga, goodbye gutom, hello pagkain. Mabuhay ang mga engineer. Kayo ang mga talagang nation builders. Salamat sa ating mga engineer. Salamat sa inyong suporta at tiwala. Sama-sama na natin paguhin ang landas ng ating minamahal na inang bayan. Magandang araw sa kanilang lahat at maraming salamat.
Okay, thank you. We have a very interesting first topic for this afternoon. Okay, let's proceed now with the second topic. But first of all, allow me to greet good afternoon to everyone. I am Wilfredo Lopez. I am a civil engineer practicing structural engineering for about 40 years. And 32 years of this, I spent as a government engineer working in the Department of Public Works and Highways, or DPWH. It's an honor to introduce our next speaker, former DPWH Secretary, Secretary Rogelio L. SINGSON. Please bear with me as I introduce our guest, as I don't want to miss some important facts about his leadership as our former secretary. In my 32 years in the DPWH that started in 1981, I witnessed the coming in and going out of different secretaries. But our guest today left in me, and surely in others in the department as well, the greatest impact on the type of leadership we had then in the department. At the onset, we were motivated by our secretary that in his inaugural address, he emphasized that his administration will no longer be business as usual. That statement inspired us, and we're relieved that finally we now have a technocrat taking control of the department. And true enough, he did the impossible tasks that previous leaderships failed to do, like addressing the issue of corruption that significantly reduced the perception of the DPWH as a corrupt agency. He ordered the removal of those officials and employees with known cases of wrongdoings. He initiated the conduct of promotional examinations for all technical employees, wherein only those who pass are qualified for promotions. That system of promotions diminished the usual notorious practice like the Padrino system, common in the DPWH. He initiated various reforms on the department's functions and processes by spearheading the development and implementation of the DPWH Quality Management System, or ISO 9001-2008. He emphasized our commitment to our mission on the acronym 5 Rs, that is, doing the right projects at the right cost with the right quality and delivered right on time and carried out by the right people. These 5 Rs became our guiding principle in doing our work towards excellence and professionalism in public service. Secretary SINGSON is an accomplished engineer. After he finished his degree in industrial engineering at the University of the Philippines, he handled various sensitive positions, both in the government as well as in the private sectors. He was the former chairman and president of the Basis Conversion Development Authority. He was also the former president and CEO of Maynila Water Services, among others. He was a recipient of various awards, and among these was the 2011 Most Distinguished Alumnus Award conferred by the University of the Philippines Alumni Association. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce our guest, Secretary Rogelio Babes SINGSON. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much, from my colleague, Engineer Willie Lopez. Magandang araw sa inyong lahat at maraming salamat at nagkaroon ako ng pagkakataon makasama kayo ngayong hapon. Ang tanong na inassign sa akin, sa mahusay na gobyerno, ano ang pwedeng iambag ng inhenyero para sa bayan? Let me rephrase that and I will try to answer this question. Sa mahusay na gobyerno, ano ang pwedeng iambag ng inhenyero para sa bayan at para sa mas nakararami? The common good. Kasi mahalaga sa akin yung doing it for the common good. Ngayong araw, palagi ko na medyo natitikman nyo na may pagkakaibang timplang lugaw ang malalasahan nyo ngayong hapon. Because of the previous webinars, you covered many technical topics. No? This afternoon, however, we hope to give you a different dimension and skill sets. Yung ibang timpla ng lugaw that an engineer should also know and practice to become a good leader. No? Mahalaga yan. Hindi ka lang magaling na inhenyero, pero dapat magaling ka din na leader. I will cover my experiences in both the government and the private sector, ano yung natutunan ko dito at how I was able to implement some of the values that I will be describing as well. I will share key principles and values to guide engineers in their practice of profession to become good leaders, nasa private sector ka man o the private or government sector. Then I think we will have, I will make myself available for Q&A. Let me start by saying that to be a good leader, one must have the following basic qualities and values. First, one who listens to better understand the needs of the various stakeholders one serves. Okay, so engineer ka, civil engineer, mechanical, sino ba yung dapat mong pinaglilingkuran? Kailangan intindihin mo kung ano yung pangangailangan nila. Pangalawa, one who engages precisely the community and the various publics or stakeholders that you serve. Meron ka bang puso, meron ka bang compassion para sa mas nakararami? Pangatlo, behave naturally. Hindi dapat plastic. Ang sinasabi nga nila, walk the talk. This relates well and relates well to all walks of life. Hindi ka naninimbang, gusto mo kausap lang yung mga boss. Hindi pwede yon. Dapat kausap mo all levels. Kaya mong kausapin yung common tao. Pang-apat, one who inspires. No? Yung talagang pakikinggan ka, paniniwalaan ka ng kahit sino sa organisasyon. Medyo kahit driver, undersecretary, other secretaries, USEC, congressman, medyo pakikinggan ka. Okay? So, ang mas madaling tandaan itong acronym. LENI. L stands for one who listens, E, one who engages, N, natural, and I, one who inspires. I sincerely believe that I see these qualities in Vice President Leni Robredo, our candidate for president. Going to my assignment this afternoon, I would like to focus my talk on working for the common good, particularly what is referred to as the bottom poor, 40%, bottom 40% of our population. Bakit? Based on a UN and World Bank studies, if we do not address the bottom 40%, the gap between the rich and the poor will continue to widen. And the poor will remain poor. As a result, the country will not move to developed country status unless we improve the lives of the bottom 40%. I am saying this because in all my assignments, I've always shown concern for the marginalized and the bottom poor. Just to declare, as mentioned, I am not a civil engineer by education. Although I graduated as an industrial engineer and I also got a certification as an Asian engineer, my engineering work based on my past experiences has been very heavy on infrastructure planning, development, and implementation. As mentioned, I was with the basis conversion, the conversion of the U.S. military bases, Clark, Subic, John Hay, and the redevelopment of the Fort Bonifacio, which we now know as Bonifacio Global City. I also got involved in the development of socialized housing, and my past assignments in LRT1 after my assignment in DPWH. In the water sector, I was president of MyNilad, and now I work with Metro Pacific Water with operations in Iloilo, Dumaguete, and Cagayan de Oro, and operations also in Vietnam. And then I was involved in power generation and was successful in putting up the first 50 megawatt solar plant for MGen. And of course, my full term, 6 years with the DPWH from 2010 to 2016. I'm very proud to say that only, I think, 3 secretaries have been able to complete a full term of 6 years. As you can see from my past experiences, most of the work I've done and continue to do has been imbued with public service and working for the common good. In fact, come to think of it, my very first work, even before graduating from industrial engineering, was with Responsible Parenthood Council, where we visited depressed communities, teaching them family planning. No, kasi dyan sa mga mahihirap, madalas dyan, mahigit 6 ang anak nila. For certain reasons. No? But just to show you that from the very start out of college, I was already very much involved in depressed areas and marginalized communities. The 2 pillars or management mantra that I consider my foundation, or I would even consider them as my way of life in all my assignments, are 2. First, the practice of good governance principles. I think my colleague here, Engineer ALCONCEL, gave already a good explanation of good governance principles. But second, I'd like to mention that the second pillar that I live by is the Catholic social teachings on social justice and compassion. Let me briefly mention, no? Ito, 5. To me, the 5 most important governance principles are accountability, transparency, rule of law, fairness, and sustainability. On the other hand, the 5 social teaching principles of the church, which guides me in all my actions and decisions, include, number 1, respect for human life, meaningful conversation and engagement with the communities. Hindi yung utos lang ng utos from the top and then leave the community hanging. They were not even involved in planning at all. Pangatlo, inclusive growth. Walang maiiwan, especially in projects, so that you give also options or preferential option for the poor and the vulnerable. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. Pang-apat, rights and responsibilities of good citizens. No? And finally, the care for Mother Earth. Ito yung ina-explain kanina ni Engineer ALCONCEL based on the encyclical work of Pope Francis, the Laudato Si movement. I'm also very much involved in advocating Laudato Si principles. Let me share now a bit some of my experience and hopefully see how these principles are applied in real life situations and decisions. As when I started as Executive Vice President of BCDA, we were tasked to optimize the assets of the former U.S. military bases, generate employment, and redevelop Fort Bonifacio to help fund our country's military modernization. Among the high priorities of the Presidential Task Force for Bases Conversion, which was the predecessor of BCDA, was how to quickly recover the lost employment due to the US military pullout. This was even further aggravated by the unexpected Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991. So napuwersa yung mga Amerikano to leave Clark at a disarray, and they all left hurriedly. And so massive pilferage happened in Clark. Halos walang maiwan doon, pati inodoro, pati pinto, pati bintana ninakaw. But being a industrial engineer and bombarded with optimization modeling, we pushed for a new law as quickly as we could, which became the BCDA Act that optimized the assets left behind and created the Bases Conversion Development Authority, the Subic Bay Freeport Zone, and the Clark Special Economic Zone. To optimize the assets of both the Subic Seaport, yung kanilang magandang deep harbor, and the Clark Airport with a very good runway system, BCDA had to construct also through a JICA loan the Subic-Clark-Tarlac Expressway for better connectivity, which we now are using. If you go to Subic in a very short travel without going to the local roads. We wanted to make sure that those who were displaced would have their jobs back as quickly as possible. That was our main mandate, recover the lost jobs. We actually did succeed, and in fact, we exceeded the employment target by the second year of the BCDA. To achieve our goals, we had to engage with the affected workers and communities as part of our planning. Kinausap namin sila. We went down. And in fact, and that's how we developed the many volunteers in Subic to protect from pilferage the assets left behind in Subic. Unlike in Clark, na nagkabiglaan because of the Mount Pinatubo, we practically had no time to discuss or to even engage with the communities. These volunteers in Subic did not get paid for a few months until the budgets of SBMA and BCDA were approved by Congress. Sadly, the only workers we could not redeploy, you can guess who. These were the workers in the bars, nightclubs, and entertainment district of the Sin cities of Olongapo and Angeles City. In the redevelopment of Fort Bonifacio, a major concern was to make sure that we provided decent housing to the many informal settlers around the Fort Bonifacio Reservation. Those of you who recall, Fort Bonifacio is a military reservation, punong-puno din ng settlers yan, mostly military personnel. We had to respect the dignity of the military and their families and place them in decent housing. This was the principle behind the highly subsidized Centennial Village and the Pamayanang Diego Silang along C5, where the condominium units were given to displaced military and paramilitary personnel, including PNP personnel, for a giveaway amortization of less than 500 pesos a month, which was really equivalent to their housing allowance. In other words, yung housing allowance nila was more than enough to pay for the unit that they were staying, which they eventually owned. Of course, we at BCDA also conducted in a very transparent manner and the first electronic bidding to select the joint venture private entity for the redevelopment of Fort Bonifacio, now known as Bonifacio Global City. The bidding resulted, if I can remember right, up to today, is the single biggest check paid to government by the private sector, which totaled 9.5 billion pesos. Marami pang butal, no? But more or less it was 9.5 billion pesos in one check. The actual construction and development of BGC we were able to utilize Filipino engineers who were just coming back from completing their work in the newly completed, at that time, the new Hong Kong Cheplakok Airport. Because we were building for the first time in the Philippines a 200-hectare high-end property development which use floor area ratios rather than just selling them as lots with all the utilities buried underground. I remember, as I was the head of the construction development of Fort Bonifacio Development Corporation, or FBDC, we had to bury about 13 underground pipes and cables from irrigation, water lines, drainage, fiber, potable and gray water lines, etc. We had to train our local contractors to submit to FBDC what we refer to then as the electronic three-dimensional GIS format. We did not accept the drawings in their traditional two-dimensional blueprints. Dahil pagka hindi na naibigay yung height or elevation from the surface, pagdating sa kanto, lahat ng buried utilities mag-uuntugan yan. At sinong nasa ibabaw, sino nasa ilalim, magkakagulo yan. So the submissions of the construction companies that we engage had to submit them in three-dimensional GIS format. Our construction manager, Bovis from UK, were also very strict. And this is where I learned many of the tricks and shortcomings of our local contractors. Diyan ko natutunan kung anong shortcut ang ginagawa ng mga contractors, which helped me a lot in my work in DPWH. As you can see in these conversion projects, we were very concerned about the impact on dignity of affected families being displaced, losing employment, but at the same time, we made sure that we were adopting accountable and transparent processes in the execution of projects and programs. When I was working as president of Maynilad, the government regulators, the MWSs, had a very, to my mind, an obsolete policy that the concessionaires could not provide access to potable water to those who could not prove that they either own the land or could show a list on their house, on their houses. In other words, the informal settlers na ang dami-dami sa Metro Manila where we had our concession could never get connected with pipe services because of this policy. We had to propose a change to that policy since I considered access to potable water as a basic human right. Because the informal settlers, especially in the old section of the Maynilad concession like Nabotas, Tondo, Malabon, where we had a lot of informal settlers, were also where we had the highest water pilferage, or what we refer to as non-revenue water. We were having more than half of what was treated water distributed in that area lost through pilferage or non-revenue water. Natural, in these areas, wala naman silang pagkukuhanan ng tubig, kaya bubutas-butasin nila yung tubo ng Maynilad. So we devised a system of providing what we referred to as the communal public faucet in depressed areas and informal settlers to provide them with access to potable water. We had to transform Maynilad into a more customer-centric and improved water services for all. Hindi lang yung may lupa, hindi lang yung may nanguupahan, kung hindi pati yung informal settlers. Again, our decision and our concern was to help the poor and marginalized. That was driving our decision to provide them with potable water, and they were paying much cheaper by connecting to the communal faucet instead of buying supposed to be potable water in jersey cans, which cost them 20 pesos per can. They were paying for connected water, 20 pesos translates to 1 cubic meter of water. My assignment in DPWH was the most transformational for me as a human being in my entire professional career. In fact, when I was discussing my options with my daughter and my family, my daughter said it was a crazy decision for me to have accepted the appointment and leaving my position as president of Maynilad. But just like what I did in Maynilad, when I accepted, I started to define clearly our vision and mission in DPWH. As engineers, sometimes we fail to see the big picture. But in all my assignments, I always firm up my mission and goal for each assignment. Dapat maliwanag, why am I there? You need a lot of discernment. You have to have a lot of thinking. What is your mission in that assignment? Just like in Maynilad, I engaged through a good friend, pro bono, a well-known PR media group to help us define our mission in DPWH based on the objective given to me by President Noynoy Aquino, which was to reduce corruption in DPWH, which was always among the top 3 most corrupt agencies in government at that time. Ang kalaban namin dyan, customs, immigration, at DPWH. I wanted to know, what do people from both external and internal expect from DPWH? The PR group came up with what we referred to as our management mantra. We started with 3, the 3 R's, which eventually became 5 as suggested by President Noynoy. And as mentioned by Engineer Willie earlier, the 5 R's, I'm glad Engineer Willie still remembers: right project, right cost, right quality, delivered right on time, and done by the right people. The 5 R's mission statement was communicated to the whole Department of Public Works and Highways with over 15,000 workers. So dapat from the driver to engineers to district engineers, naintindihan nila what we were trying to achieve. To reduce corruption, we had to choose the right projects that would benefit the common good and the community, not just for particular politicians, which was the old practice. Right cost means we had to do a competitive, transparent public bidding, no favored contractors. Right quality meant that the contractors had to follow strictly the specifications of their contract. And we engaged the local communities, church organizations, media, NGOs, and third-party project inspectors to help us monitor the projects in these localities. I found this very effective in going against the very corrupt politicians and local leaders, yung matitigas ang ulo at nasanay sa dating gawe. Right on time meant that we had to put our contractors to follow their contractual obligations and timelines para mapakinabangan kaagad yung mga projects being implemented using government resources. Finally, right people. We implemented an overhaul of the DPWH structure starting from the top, from USECs, ASECs, regional directors, district engineers, and down the line. Through an evaluation, we reduced our workforce by 25%, either force them to resign or provide early retirement option. Walang palakasan. Vacant positions, as mentioned, were always through a selection process that included examinations, and all of promotions were from within the organization. I can say that except for my driver and personal security, I did not bring anyone from outside to fill up any vacant position. I had to walk the talk. Food served during meetings had to become very simple. Hindi na pwedeng lechon every meeting. Kasi for DPWH engineers, tatawag lang sa contractor yan. The contractors will deliver isa, dalawa, tatlong lechon anytime. All my meetings were also done in my DPWH office and not in hotels or restaurants like the practice in the past. I was even known for not serving coffee or water to visitors, particularly politicians. Para hindi sila nagtatagal, ayaw ko nakikipagkwentuhan dahil uubusin yung oras mo. Kung pwede lang mag-usap kami ng nakatindig. And I think people will remember that I really do not serve coffee or water to visitors. Finally, to complete the overhaul of DPWH, we implemented a young engineers management program, hiring 1,600 licensed civil engineers across the country with a below 30 years old as a criteria. When I was talking to young engineers before the program, many of them dreamt of going abroad to earn the equivalent of US $500 to $600 a month. So I decided, with the permission of President Noynoy and Secretary Abad of DBM, to implement a program hiring them at an engineer level 2 with permanent appointment, hindi contractual, for 30,000 a month. So many of these young, I was able to recruit across the country, even from the private sector at that time, who were just paying the engineers at 18 or even below 18,000 a month. So many of these young, idealistic, qualified civil engineers joined the department and now are having good careers in DPWH. One of the major programs in DPWH was to reduce flooding. Gaya nga nung sabi ni BP Lenny, ang kanyang priority ay water resources management. To be able to reduce flooding and to help the poor informal settlers, we had to immediately provide resettlement housing to the hundreds of informal settlers on waterways, like what we were able to do along Pasig River all the way up to Marikina River. We were able to clear 5-meter easement on both sides of Pasig and Marikina River. Otherwise, I told President Noynoy, boss, every year we will encounter flooding in many parts of Metro Manila, and we will always encounter the same informal settlers taon-taon. We will continue to bring them every year to emergency evacuation centers. Another major step that we did was to introduce for sustainability what we refer to now as coconut. Instead of using concrete for slope protection, I insisted on using coconutting. If you go on the national or the expressways, North Luzon, the Subic-Clark Expressway, the slopes there are not using concrete. They are using coconut and vegetation. As engineers, whether civil, mechanical, electrical, or industrial, you can get involved in so many ways to ensure a better future for the next generation and for the common good. As you are given a new assignment or position, always start with clearly defining your mission statement every time. If you are the head of an organization or group, the mission has to be shared at all levels. It cannot be just your personal mission, but should become the mission and the mantra of the organization you belong to. Understand the practice good governance principles, whether you are working for government or the private sector, but more so if you are working for government. If you are working in the private sector, advocate specific practices related to ESG, or the environment, social, and corporate governance. Studies will show that good governance or good companies and good employers are those that measure ESG, or environment, social, and good governance credentials. That is now even a requirement for listed companies. As you can see as engineers, whether in the private or in the private sector, one can be all over the place and working for the common good, particularly to help the bottom poor and the marginalized sectors of society. Because without a good leader, these marginalized societies or marginalized sector of society will most likely be left behind out of the benefits of spending and investment programs and projects. They will probably get some small tokens or what we refer to as naambunan of the spending for projects and programs. So unless we really develop specific projects and programs addressed to the bottom poor, this is not going to trickle down. This was the driving force behind our convergence between DPWH and the Department of Tourism. What we did was to improve access to our major tourist destinations all over the country. We knew that tourism had the biggest impact in the local community and in employment generation. So together with the Department of Tourism, we provided wide national roads, all major tourism destinations, airports and seaports in the country. In closing, let me again mention key governance principles to include accountability, transparency, rule of law, and fairness and sustainability. And also as a way of life, the Catholic social teachings principles that include respect for human life, meaningful engagement and conversation with communities that we serve, inclusive growth with preferential option for the poor and vulnerable, rights and responsibilities of good citizens, and finally, to care for our only earth, our Mother Earth. Finally, as engineers and leaders, there's so much you can do out there. Remember the acronym LENI. Learn to listen to understand better the issues and concerns. Engage in meaningful conversation with the stakeholders. May puso dapat tayo. Be natural. Walk the talk. Wag kang plastic. And finally, inspire all walks of life. Inspire them to work for the common good. And be courageous. Do not be afraid. With that, I end and thank you very much for your time this Saturday afternoon.
Thank you very much, Secretary. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Sabi nga ni ng ating sa audience natin, sabi niya, nalinis ibig sabihin ni Secretary SINGSON ang DPWH nung panahon niya.
Yeah, I remember one of the significant projects of Secretary SINGSON when he introduced yung cadet engineers program sa DPWH. Kasi before that, ang average age ng DPWH employees is about 60. Ang sabi nga namin noon, within 5 years, wala nang empleyado DPWH. But when those cadet engineers entered, biglang bumaba yung average age. Not only that, yung mga cadet engineers ngayon, yun ang mga magagaling sa DPWH. And hopefully, as what Undersecretary said before, sana hindi sila na-infect ng system because they are very idealistic. And true, nalenis nga ni Secretary SINGSON. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Willie.
Completos regados na po tayo sa ating inihandang lugawan ngayong hapon, both from the private sector and the government sector combined sa isang malinis na pamamalakad ng gobyerno. Ngayon po ay sasamantalahin natin and we'll get reactions from our audience. Can we have first Dr. Beng Manalang to react or to give a reaction on the two topics that were discussed?
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Nakakatuwa po dahil ang dami po ninyong acronym para po sa ating minamahal na VP Lenny. Ako din po, meron din po akong acronym. So gagamitin ko po ang salitang love, environment, natural resources, and important. Kasi po si VP Lenny, she champions and loves our environment and believes that natural resources are important. Isa po ako sa pinalad na maging kabahagi ng International Resource Panel ng United Nations Environmental Program at 6 na taon din po ako naglingkod sa mga global assessments para po sa sustainability. Kaya po gusto kong bigyan ng pakahulugan, ano ba talaga yung sustainability? Ang sustainability po ay ang avoidance of depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, kung ang ilog ay namamatay, malaki ang problema. Mga ganong klase ano po. Kaya nakakatuwa po na we can learn and listen, engage in meaningful convo, and naturally, we need to inspire all people from all walks of life, lalo na po sa critical na panahon ngayon. Kailangan po talagang magkaroon tayo ng mga makahulugang mga conversations sa lahat po ng tao para maengganyo po natin sila na piliin ang katotohanan, ang katarungan at ang totoong progreso na hindi po nila ibibenta ang kanilang kaluluwa. No po. So si VP Lenny po, natitiyak po natin na ang 5 governance laws and aspects na tinuran po ni Secretary SINGSON ay gusto ko nga po palang sabihin, Secretary SINGSON, na ako po isa sa mga nagmamayabang na graduate po ng UPIE dahil po kayo ay kakabahagi po sa UP Alumni Engineers po ng Universidad ng Pilipinas. Kaya po katulad po ninyo ay amin pong sa lahat po ng aspeto namin ginagawa, kasi ngayon po kahit po nagretiro na po ako sa pagtuturo sa paaralan, dati rin po akong nagturo sa Universidad ng Pilipinas at sa De La Salle. Ngayon po ay tumutulong po ako sa mga kooperatiba, lalo na po sa pag-develop ng agricultural and aquaculture business corridor in Region 6. And we are working closely together with DFAR and SIFTEC and helping countryside development para po isulong po ang issue po ng environment at sustainability. So naniniwala po tayo na ang ating pong minamahal na VP Lenny ay talaga po namang tutugunan ang accountability, transparency, rule of law, fairness, and sustainability. Dahil kitang-kita po natin sa track record po ng kanyang pagsisilbi sa ating pong bayan, ang respeto po niya sa human life ay wala pong kapantay. At ang inclusive growth talaga naman po kasama ang mga nasa laylayan ng lipunan. Pero tayo pong mga inhenyero, napakalaki po talaga ng ating bahaging gagampanan. Dahil tayo po ay logical mag-isip, may pragmatikong pananaw, may malakihang pananaw at kamalayan para po sa pagkakaroon ng tinatawag nating integration ng lahat ng mga inisyatibo mula sa iba't ibang aspeto ng lipunan. So, ang inclusive growth ay hindi mangyayari sa pagnanais mo lamang na isama lahat, ngunit kailangang bigyan mo rin sila ng empowerment para makasali sila. Kaya po ang lugaw ng kaalaman ay isang antas ng empowerment para po sa kabataan. Dahil darating ang panahon, sila po ang tatayo sa mga kinatatayuan natin ngayon at kinakailangan po ang susunod na henerasyon ay kinailangan merong kaalaman, may katapangan, pipiliin ng katarungan at hindi papayag sa mga maling gawi, mga kasinungalingan. Ano po. So sa susunod pong 9 ng Mayo, sana po ay manaig ang moral uprightness dahil ang ating pong VP Lenny ay tunay na morally upright. And katulad po ng ginawa po ni Secretary SINGSON at yung sustainability na pinaliwanag po sa atin ni Engineer Licop and Engineer ALCONCEL, nalinis po ang DPWH sa panahon ni Secretary SINGSON at ang sustainability po ng mga infrastructure projects ay natiyak. Kaya marami pong salamat sa pag-uugnayan at marami rin pong salamat sa pagkakataon na makapagbahagi ng aking maliit na mga ideya, opinyon at insights. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Annabella.
Salamat. Well, ako po, kasi pareho kami sa water sector galing ni Secretary Singson, nabanggit ko nga sa kanya kahapon. Isa ako sa nagtaas ang kilay nung tanggapin ni Secretary Singson yung pagiging DPWH Secretary from Presidente ng Maynila. Diba sabi ko, pambihira naman to. Although hindi po kandidato sa Secretary Singson para i-promote ko, yung po kanyang hangaring maglingkod, yun din po yung hangaring maglingkod sa atin ng team Lenny at Kiko sa ating mga Pilipino. So sabi nga ni Beng, by May 9, pumili po tayo ng isang kandidato, ng mga kandidato na bubuo ng team na magpapatakbo nating gobyerno. Willie, meron pa ba tayong reactor?
May reactor pa yata si Mr. Arnel Molina. Arnel, nandiyan ka ba, Arnel?
Good afternoon po.
Yeah, Arnel, good afternoon.
It's just nice to be with the fellow engineers po and listening to the message of Engineer ALCONCEL and at the same time from the Secretary. By the way, I graduated mining engineering po. I was invited by Dr. Andy Oreta, who is a friend of mine. And after my graduation from UP, I work as a Bureau of Mines engineer. And later on, I worked for a long time as an OFW with Schlumberger until my retirement. Anyhow, it's good to note po na napakinig ko yung mga speaker natin. And I remember very well yung aming mga corporate values sa Schlumberger. You can check them at our website. One of which is adherence to good governance. For example, I have seen a lot of engineers being fired for being engaged in some unethical practices. So very strict po kami doon sa puntong yon, considering that I also experienced when I was managing our office of Schlumberger in 1995. I was involved in the initial planning of Malampaya and also yung Manigin project ng PNOCEC. But anyhow, medyo na ano po ako doon sa mga sinabi ni Secretary that once we accept some responsibility, we should immediately check yung mission and vision. So to me, that are very clear goals to set our standards whenever we start doing our work. So yun po ang pinakamalaking takeaway ko. And in fact, I was about to ask Secretary, I know yung question ko was not related at all to civil. Baka pwede rin po niyang sagutin. Kung pwede naman niyang hindi. I was just wondering, what can we do with the oil exploration development here in our country po? Considering na Malampaya gas are about to be depleted, and in our history of oil exploration and development, we have only drilled 900 wells since 15 or in the 16th century. And while if we compare ourselves with Indonesia, they are drilling about 900 wells per year. So we could see the disparity there. So in as much as very relevant yung ating energy security because of the high prices of oil, alam naman natin that it is still increasing, though medyo na-reduce siya pa konti-konti. And maybe we should really plan for or make a plan how to develop our resources, because if we look at a just transition to renewable energy, matagal pa yun. So I would like to address this question to Secretary SINGSON.
I fully agree that we should energy security has to be addressed by the next administration. As you said, no, Malampaya is running out. We expect maybe at most 2027. No, and as you said, unfortunately, it looks like maraming nag-a-apply dun sa mga areas that they think are good prospects, pero inuupuan, no? Yung mga may hawak niyan, hindi naman dinedevelop, naghahanap lang ng i-flip lang nila, no? Naghahanap ng makikikilan. I'd be very brutal about it, no?
Yes. Or stocks.
Hinahawakan, hindi dinedevelop, no? So I think there has to be a clear policy. Ganun din sa lahat ng resources, whether for water rights, mining rights, maraming nag-a-apply, maraming may hawak pero walang capacity to develop. No? So we have to loosen that up. At kung hindi mo ma-develop in a certain period, you have to give it up. Government has the right to cancel them, no? And give it up to someone who is ready, who can develop, no? So what energy security has to be a priority of the next government.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Robert, magiging community of engineers na talaga tayo, no? Iba-iba na yung mga kanina may IE tayo, merong mining, and then meron pa yata tayo magre-react na isang mechanical engineer.
Yeah. Sigurado ako
Reyes.
May 9, mamimina na natin yung ating kung sino magsaserve sa atin. Anyway, so meron sa tayong mechanical engineer, Gigi Reyes. Yep.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Engineer G. Reyes from the Department of Mechanical Engineering sa UP. Ako'y isang faculty member doon. Right, and first of all, I'd like to thank Engineers ALCONCEL and SINGSON for providing us, everyone here, with the valuable insights on the necessary qualifications of engineers working with the government of our President Lenny. Okay, malaking confidence ko diyan. And I'd also like to thank the organizers for today's forum. All right, I'd just like to share yung insight ko na na-pick up ko dito sa discussion today, no? So it's true that the role of engineers in any field, regardless kahit anong field tayo, in the country, our country is significant, even to a certain extent critical. So yung primary deliverable ng kahit sinong engineers to provide the best solution for a given problem. Ngayon sa mga estudyante kasi nasanay sila pagka nagbibigay na problem, isa lang yung sagot Tapos tama pa o mali. When in fact, maraming choices yan. Bakit? Maraming choices ng possible solutions. Bakit? Kasi in an engineering solution, ang dami nating unknowns I think nabanggit kanina, I think without really specifying those unknowns, these were presented by our two speakers a while ago. Okay? So not just dealing with several unknowns, but also looking at several impacts of the solutions. So the optimal solution will be related to maximizing the positive and at the same time minimizing the negative impacts of these solutions. In other words, hahanap ng kombinasyon yan. Now, engineers ALCONCEL and SINGSON respectively presented certain parameters and roadmaps on how to arrive at these best solutions. So we need an ethical approach. We need to apply an ethical approach when considering other parameters aside from, okay, we go beyond just the efficiency, reliability, and cost of the best solutions, pero meron din mga katulad na social impact, environmental impact, sustainability, and a host of other impacted parameters. So in order to correctly assess these parameters, we need vital information. And this information is best picked up through proper communications with all parties involved, whom we call the stakeholders. Nga, pinakita ni Engineer Babes yan kanina. So hindi pwede ang Wikipedia dito, lalo na ang TikTok. We really need to go out of our way to pick up all of these proper solutions. Kaya nga, ginagawa nila Lenny nga, umiikot-ikot sila. And not just to rally, but to really talk to people and find ano ba talaga kailangan nyo. Diba? So, pati tayo as engineers, we cannot just sit on our desks, tapos mag-Wikipedia na lang or something, o kukunin na sa libro. Hindi po eh. Yung libro, yung mga pinag-aaralan natin sa school, just provides us with tools on how to form solutions. But the real solutions will come out when we pick up the correct information from those who will be affected the most, whom we call the stakeholders. So once we get the correct and valuable information, then can these be utilized in developing the possible solutions that will be matched with the parameters that will be greatly impacted. As engineers, tayo lahat dito, we're empowered to provide the best solutions in service of our country, just like what VP Lenny and Kiko are doing nowadays. So I'd like to thank engineers ALCONCEL and SINGSON once again for pointing us in the right direction. Guro, ang tanong ko lang, sino ba magiging watchdogs natin as engineers? Kasi ang dami natin engineering bodies. May kanya-kanyang code of ethics. When in the end, okay, pag mag-provide na tayong solutions, who could, especially Lenny and Kiko, turn to really get what we can say credible, credible data? I know it's going to be a very difficult question to answer maybe at this point kasi ang dami nating engineer organization, di ba? So yan ang aking reaction and the question that I posed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Engineer Reyes, for that wonderful reaction.
Yes, ma'am.
Akala niya nakalimutan na natin. Ang kasama ko sa PTC, si Eric, isang metallurgical engineer. So talagang tayo ngayon, kompletos regados tayo. Hindi lang tayo
Thank you, Bob. Sagutin ko muna yung tanong ni G. Kasi sino yung mag-handle na. Well, eto, nandito yung aking kaibigan, si Fred Monsada. He is the president of the Philippine Technological Council. That's the umbrella organization of all 13 engineering professional societies. And kung alam ni President Lenny na, pag nanalo, we can be an advisory body on technical matters regarding engineering. And yan, ilang presidente na dumaan, hindi tayo na-recognize. I hope we have now an enough voice para masabi na andito ang mga professional na engineer handang maglingkod sa ating bayan. Okay. Now, in reaction to the talks of our speakers, Secretary Babes and Engineer ALCONCEL, natutuwa ako dahil minention nila yung Code of Ethics. And remember, yung Code of Ethics, dapat yan nag-umpisa sa bahay. Okay? Sa mismong tahanan natin, dyan na nade-develop yan. Then, pag pumasok tayo sa eskwelahan, we have the good manners and right conduct. So, ayan na yung mga pundasyon dyan. Ngayon, pagdating sa college, in every course, every subject, dapat yan na-inculcate yung practice of engineering ethics. Okay? And then finally, once we become professionals, nasa ng main responsibility for inculcating the code of ethics. Yung mga professional societies, meron kayong kanya-kanyang code of ethics na dapat they see to it na pinapractice ng kanyang engineers. Now, I like to tell yung mga current experiences ko. Now, I've been asked to do an audit of a mining company kasi they're buying their product. And one of the things that pag sinabing audit, you normally focus on technical issues, environment, hindi. Ang naging focus ng audit is yung mga ethical practices like is there bribery happening in the purchasing, and the procurement of materials? Are the wealth judiciously shared with the communities? And to the point, a specific question like in hiring security people, do they follow global standards to make sure that the people manning the security of the are competent, and they have also this ethics. Hindi sila walang sexual harassment or everything like that. And then child labor is upon. Okay, and another experience is when making deals or contracts with other mining companies, especially international mining companies. One of the first of the questions that they focus is the anti-bribery practice. Okay, does the company have a policy on anti-bribery? Do they hold trainings to their employees and officers about anti-bribery? No, not practicing bribery. And what are the consequences if you are one is caught in bribery? No? Okay? So may kasabihan na pag walang magbibigay, walang tatanggap. And that's the other way around is true. Kung walang tatanggap, walang magbibigay. So by cutting one side, basically you have solved 50% of your problem. Now, kami ni Fred dito, we represent the mining industry. Okay? Now, alam nyo naman, 25 years ago, ang mining industry sa Pilipinas nasangkot because there's this, you probably heard about the busang, the busang scandal, no? That there's a Filipino that tried to put gold nuggets in the samples so that tumaas yung gold assays. And what happened? The prices of the stocks of that company shot up. Okay, so because of that, nagkaroon ng regulations or code of practices for the reporting of reports. And we here in the Philippines, meron na tayong what we call the Philippine Mineral Reporting Code. Now, ano yung ginagawa nun? It makes sure that we practice the standards and the ethical, the moral aspects of writing reports so that yung mga investors nang nagbalalagay ng stocks sa mining companies hindi napoprotektahan. No, so yung reports nila truthful, okay? At pag sinabi na lang we have so many amount of this metal, alam natin na totoo yun. And that gives us a good basis para mag-invest ka ron kasi totoo yung sinasabi nila. And one final comment, no? Sabi nila si VP Lenny daw ay anti-mining dahil in one of the debates, sinabi niya i-revoke daw niya yung EO 130 ni President Duterte, lifting the ban. Hindi, she never said she was anti-mining. She was for setting up of no mining zones. Hindi naman niya sinabing no mining in the Philippines. And she even said that she is for responsible mining. And I'm sure that being an economist, she knows what's the importance of mining and then that we have to balance mining with our environment and social development. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat sa pagkakataon na makapag-comment dito.
Thank you, Sir Eric. Thank you, Sir Eric.
Thank you.
So, meron pa tayong isang reactor, si Sir Eugene Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Maraming salamat at gusto ko lang batiin rin si Secretary Babe SINGSON. Witness ako doon sa mga sinabi niya nung binisita namin siya sa DPWH. Pati siya pumila doon sa cafeteria nung kakain kami. At saka KKB kami noon. KKB. Pumila pa siya kaya yung mga kahit pinapauna na siya ng mga empleyado ng DPWH sabi niya hindi, pipila kami. So, witness ako dyan, Sec Babes. Tapos yung sa Coconut, yung na-introduce yung Coconut, kasama rin ako noon kay Sec Babes. Nag-arrange pa nga siya ng meeting kay Pinoy noon eh. And medyo kinakabahan kami kasi Wala siyang bodyguard, walang wangwang, ganyan. Pero yun, sumakay kami kasama siya sa sasakyan, no? Doon sa meeting kay Pinoy para introduce nga at i-promote yung coconuts. At hanggang ngayon, pag bumabiyahe ako sa Mindanao, Sec Babes, nakikita ko na after more than 12 years na actually, no? Since that time, nakikita ko pa rin, no, yung mga coconuts doon sa mga projects ninyo sa Mindanao. Siguro isang tanong, no, kung may time pa tayo sana, ano na nga ba ang nangyari ngayon after nawala na si Sec Babes at sa DPWH, no? Yung mga magagandang nagawa ni Sec Babes doon, ano na kaya yung nangyari ngayon? At yan kasi ang kailangang ayusin na haharaping problema, no, ni President Leni. Ika nga, no, napakalaki niyan, no, na natuon sa build, no, parang walang tao no, basta't magtayo. Yun lang ang sinasabi at yan ang sinasabi ng isang kandidato na itutuloy lang niya. Parang walang concern sa tao yung ganong slogan, no, ng build. Lalo na ngayong lampas kalahati na ng ating populasyon nasa urban areas, no. Dati nung panahon namin ni Reyes sa UP mga 70-30 pa noon 70% in the rural areas, 30% in the urban areas. Ngayon more than half of our population is in the urban or at least semi-urban areas. Pag nag-build ka, siguradong masasagasaan tao, no? At yan ang sinasabi ni VP na hindi niya papayagan. Tao pa rin ang konsiderasyon kung bakit tayo nagtatayo ng infrastruktura. Napakahalaga no, napakaganda ng sinabi niya ngayon. Hindi lang basta-basta build. Kailangan alamin kung ano talaga ang kailangan ng tao, mapa sa transportation, mapa sa daan, mapa sa housing, no? Yung tao ang aalamin muna anong kailangan talaga ng tao. At yun ang magiging batayan ng ating infrastruktura. So napakaganda nun nung bahaging yun ng plataforma ni VP Leni at ni Senator Kiko Pangilinan. So yun lang, kung meron lang panahon mamaya, baka meron sa atin.
Sagutin ko very quickly. Jin, may oras pa naman, 2 minutes. Yung kasing sinasabi mo, kaya sa akin ang mahalaga yung convergence program with among the infrastructure agencies. Alam mo, kung minsan, each agency kanya-kanyang plano, kanya-kanyang budget, labo-labo sila, no? Nung pumasok ko sa DPWH, kinakantyawan ko yung DOTR pa noon, no? Sabi ko sa kanila, nagde-develop pala kayo ng airport dyan, hindi namin alam. Ano yung, tignan mo yung kalye papunta sa airport ninyo, barangay road. Paano kayong makakaabot dyan ng international airport, no? So, what we did was define a convergence program. Kaya nabanggit ko yung Department of Tourism because the local community benefits a lot from local tourism industry, no? Kaya sabi ko kay Secretary Jimenez, ibigay mo nga sa akin yung priority destinations mo. I remember very well, yung underground river, nasa 7 wonders of the world na. Yung pumunta ka ron, 2 tricycle, magbubungguan, hindi pwede magsalubong eh. Paano mo papupuntahin ng mga turista doon, no? So, sabi ko kay Mayor Hagedorn, Mayor, arboring ko na tong barangay road mo, gawin kong national road, no? So ginawa naming national road. And the same story all over. Papunta ka sa Sorsogon, sa Butanding, no? Oras-oras na dadaan ka sa bayan, dadaan ka sa palengke, dadaan ka sa sementeryo, lahat ng klase pipigilin mo, no? So we did a lot of convergence, no? DOTR, airports, seaports, tapos with the tourism industry, no? To me, importante yun, no? Para ganon, talagang you disperse. And problema nga, as you mentioned, everybody thinks all the work is in the urban center, no? Pero hindi eh. You have to disperse it through public transport. Strategic, hindi lang yung build ng build. tignan mo kung saan pupunta yan. So another convergence is with the production areas, no? Sa Mindanao, ang daming production areas dyan na hindi accessible sa merkado, no? So what we did was we did what we refer to as a master plan for Mindanao transport, where nung dinatnan namin yan, ang mga kalye puros north-south ang orientation, walang east-west, no? So we started opening a lot of east-west orientation, no? And the whole country was oriented north-south. Para pumunta ka dito sa east, pupunta ka muna sa norte para pumunta ka sa east, no? What hindi ka gumawa ng east-west para direct access, no? So we opened a lot of those infrastructure precisely to provide access to markets, no, and create more employment in the local economy. So that's my quick answer, Jim.
That's good. That's good. That's very true, Secretary Babes. Sana ho yung build na yon hindi maging repair someday. So we have the last reactor, no, yung from the F.PICE. Sino yung reactor natin sa junior PICE?
Mike Kinao. Mike?
Mike Kinao.
Good afternoon po.
Good afternoon, Mike.
Yan. And first of all po, thank you so much po for Lugaw ng Kaalaman organizers. See you for Lenny, Kiko, and Engineers for Lenny for this event po. Ang dami po namin natutunan. Yung second to the last na po ito, pero ang dami pa din po namin natutunan. Tuloy-tuloy po, tuwing Saturday, simula po ng January. The earlier, also to our speakers and sa mga nag-shares po for sa ating open forum. The earlier topic was really important for us engineers and future one. Kasi as a member of society, leaders and future leaders, I'm sure that the two Lenny mnemonics from our amazing guest speakers, Engineer ALCONCEL and Secretary SINGSON, that we learned earlier will remain on us. I hope that it will be our guiding principle po, especially that the election on May 9 is coming na. Sana makapili po tayo ng maganda and mabuting mga leaders na mag-shoulders ng ating kinabukasan. So as for the question, is wala na po ang question kasi nasagot na din po siya kanina ni Engineer SINGSON and yun lang po. Thank you so much po ulit.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. So we will entertain a few questions. Robert?
If there are questions,
actually, merong isang interesting question dito kay Secretary SINGSON.
Yeah.
Medyo controversial. Basahin ko na. Question from Jom Lansang. Secretary SINGSON, we have seen in social media that many infrastructures being claimed as projects of the Villar Duterte. Ano po masasabi niya rito?
Nabasa ko yan. Kala ko hindi mo tatanungin eh. Pero tapatan naman ito. Anyway, I think people will attest in DPWH na nung pumasok nung inappoint si Mark Villar, no? Full disclosure lang, si Senator Manny Villar, contemporary ko sa UP yan, no? Matalik kong kaibigan, I'm very good friend of Cynthia Villar. So pinakiusapan ako nung mag-asawa actually, no? Sabi, tulungan mo naman yung bata. Sabi ko, pagpasok sa DPWH. So what I did was I went around the regions and actually endorsed him. Sabi ko dun sa mga taga-DPWH, huwag niyo nang pakialaman kung bakit siya yung na-appoint. Nandiyan na yun. Wala naman kayong magagawa, no? Tulungan niyo na lang para ganon yung mga ginawa natin magpatuloy, no? So ang pinakiusap ko lang kay Secretary Mark, sabi ko for the next 2 to 3 years, ang daming project na nandiyan na in the pipeline. All you have to do is complete it, no? And then while you are completing it, then you can think of your own projects moving forward, no? So tuwan-tuwa naman siya at after 3 months ini-inaugurate niya na yung NAIA Expressway. 3 months pa lang, no? Nag-i-inaugurate na siya, no? So sabi ko, marami ka pang i-inaugurate, ituloy mo lang yung nandiyan na sa pipeline. Siguraduhin mo lang na may budget, no? So in a way, I'm happy na hindi niya binago kasi yung mga ibang departamento, pag upo ng bagong secretary, tinatapon yung mga programang nandiyan dyan eh. No? New staff, new direction. Dito sa DPWH, hindi nangyari yon. And that much I appreciate. Ang sabi ko lang kay Mark, siguraduhin mo na yung budget sustentado. No? Kasi baka kung saan-saan i-shuffle eh. And recently I heard sinaffle na, Willie, yung ating right of way. Wala na sa DPWH. Nasa Malacanang daw. Dito ka sasamba. Paano ka mababayaran ngayon yan? So, sa madalit sabi, I really don't mind kung siya nag-i-inaugurate. No? I'm happy that it is being completed. Maraming naumpisan dyan, panahon natin in 2012, including the to be inaugurated na binisita ko, hindi lang bisita, I walked the line up kalahati nung Cebu-Cordova Link Expressway, no, that will link Cebu City South directly to the Mactan International Airport, no. Linakad ko yon, medyo pag-uwi ko dito sa Manila, medyo masakit yung kaso-kasuan ko dahil mahigit 4 na kilometro din yung nalakad during noon time, no. So it will be inaugurated at mukhang pipilitin that there will be a ceremonial opening para alam mo na ma-claim nila kanila. Pero alam natin na 2012 pa yan, inuumpisa na yung negotiations dyan. We bidded that out and well, indeed, there was an unsolicited proposal for that project. And I'm happy that it was completed and it was not aborted. No? Kasi maraming projects in the past inabort eh. No?
Okay.
So yun, ang sagot ko dyan.
Yeah. So that's it.
Alam na natin mga Pilipino kung sinong nagsimula. Ang importante dyan, sinimulan, tinapos. Di ba?
Okay. So,
Tama yun.
at least meron silang ribbon cutting na ginagawa.
Oh.
So thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much din, Eric, Freddy. Thank you. So we now award the certificates. Can you plus take the certificates? Sinong ayun. So
Siguro ako yung magbabasa rito, ako yung nagpakilala.
Yeah, please, Robert.
Lugao ng Kaalaman, Civil Engineering Webtalk, Certificate of Appreciation is presented to Engineer FEDERICO ALCONCEL for sharing his time and expertise in the Civil Engineering Webtalk. Number 9, INHENYERO para sa mahusay na gobyerno, given this 9th of April 2022 through Zoom, signed by Andres Winston Ureta, the convener of C4Lenny, and Emmanuel Llanes, the coordinator for engineers for Lenny.
Okay.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Freddy. So
Ikaw yung susunod.
for Secretary SINGSON, Megan, yung certificate for Secretary. Okay, so Lugaw ng Kaalaman, Civil Engineering Webtalks. This certificate of appreciation is presented to the Honorable Secretary Rogelio L. SINGSON for sharing his time and expertise in the Civil Engineering Webtalk number 9, INHENYERO para sa mahusay na gobyerno, given on 09 April 2022 through Zoom, signed by Andres Winston Ureta, the convener, and Emmanuel Llanes, the co-convener. Thank you very much again, Secretary, and it's good to see you again after so many years.
Salamat, Willie. Thank you so much to the Engineering Webtalk organizers. Maraming salamat.
Thank you,
Alam
sir.
nyo, hindi ko malaman kung paano kong iiwasan sana itong hapon na to dahil gusto ko magpunta sa Pampanga dahil yung misis ko taga Pampanga at pinipilit ako. Sabi ko, mahirap naman ako magbigay ng webtalk ng on the go. So, anyway, I'm continue to monitoring dahil may performance yung UPIE doon eh.
Oh.
Ilo-launch kaming musical for VP Lenny. So, yun ang launching mamayang gabi after Lenny's VP Lenny's talk or yung kanyang speech. So,
Sa Facebook na lang, sir.
abangan ninyo yung musical ng
Yes.
medyo mabigat sa damdamin.
Facebook na lang. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we also have a certificate of appreciation to our representative from the Junior PICE.
So I'll take the honors of reading the
Yes, please, Robert.
bilang past president ng PICE.
Yes, yes.
Ng Kaalaman, Civil Engineering Webtalk, certificates of recognition is presented to Junior Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers, Lungsod ng Maynila, for actively promoting and supporting the Civil Engineering Webtalk number 9, INHENYERO, para sa mahusay na gobyerno. Resources speakers are Honorable Secretary ROGELIO SINGSON and Engineer FEDERICO ALCONCEL, given this 9th day of April 2022 through Zoom, again signed by Andy and Eman Llanes. Sino yung representative? So that would be Engineer, J.PICE pa lang pala to. Estudyante pa to. So, si Mr. Kino ba yung magre-represent? Anyway, this is for the group of J.PICE Lungsod ng Maynila, na kung saan dating past president si Engineer ALCONCEL sa Lungsod ng Maynila chapter ng PICE. So we are turning back the microphone to Andy for the synthesis of this afternoon's presentation webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, our moderators, Robert and Willie. Siguro hindi ko na dapat i-synthesize dahil maliwanag naman yung mga mensahe ng ating mga speakers, saka yung ating mga guest, moderators, saka yung mga invited reactors about our message of a good governance. So, gusto ko na yung ipakilala ang ating VP Lenny, ang mensahe niya para sa ating mga young civil engineers in particular. Can you play the message of VP Lenny?
Naging malinaw sa amin, kapag kabataan ng katuwang, laging may mai-ambag na bago. Buong-buo ibinibigay ang sarili at laging ibinubuhos ang lahat ng energy sa gawain. As civil engineers, malalim ang gagampanan ninyong tungkulin sa pagpanday ng mundong pinapangarap natin. Engineers find harmony in the moving parts and make sure that every component allows the organic whole to function and work well. You will not only plan, design, and oversee the construction of buildings and infrastructures. In doing so, you will reflect what we value, whom we care for, and what we dream of. You will shape the way we experience things, from roads, railways, and bridges, to harbors, dams, and irrigation systems. Your task is not simply to work on blueprints of metal, wood, and stone. The structures you build will form, in literal and metaphorical concrete, the very backbone of our nation. Ang mensahe ko ngayon sa inyo, pakinggan ang kwento ng mga komunidad. Magbabad sa pinagdaraanan nila. Bitbitin ang mga dalahing bitbit nila. Gawin ang kayang gawin para ibsan ang pagdurusa. And as you make each other's dreams and battles your own, remind one another of the good you are capable of doing. Empower and draw strength from this community and pave the way for even more to follow. Ngayon, higit kailanman, dahil sa inyo, mas lumalakas ang loob namin. Walang pandemyang hindi kayang sugpuin. Walang pagsubok na hindi kayang lampasan. kung paiiralan natin ang malasakit at pagtutulungan. Kaya tuloy lang, padayon lang. Lagi ninyong tatandaan, hindi kayo mga bata lang. Mga Pilipino kayong may kakayahan at lakas na gumawa ng mas patas at mas makataong mundo para sa inyong mga sarili at para sa bawat Pilipino. Maraming salamat, mabuhay kayong lahat.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice President Lenny Robredo. And now let's go to the closing remarks. To close our program, I would like to introduce the President of the Philippine Technological Council. He is metallurgical engineering and an expert in accreditation of engineering programs, Engineer Fred Monsada.
Ay, maraming salamat sa pag-introduce, Doc Andy. Of course, gusto kong i-recognize si Secretary SINGSON, ang ating, actually siya yung unang Asian engineer from DPWH. At siya din po ay isang honorary fellow ng Asian Federation of Engineering Organizations, to which PTC has been yung Philippine representative ang PTC. And of course, yung aking katukayo, no, kaibigan, brother, and a friend, si Engineer FEDERICO ALCONCEL. FEDERICO din yung pangalan ko dyan. No? So, maraming salamat. Ang hirap kayang sumunod sa dalawang magagaling na mga speakers. No? Ang hirap sumunod. At ang hirap din i-close. No? Kasi alam niyo kung bakit. Dahil lahat ng mga sinabi nila ay mga bagay na dapat tayong mga engineers, lalo na yung mga nasa Facebook, no? Lalo na yung mga Facebook, tayo dito. Pare-parehas tayo naka-pink. Ako naka-pink, may stripe lang ng konti, no? Pero yung mga nasa labas, yung mga nasa Facebook, malaki ang tsansa na may mga andoon na hindi member ng choir. Ibig sabihin, pwede nating i-preach what we are preaching now, and we hope yung mga nasa labas, mapakinggan nila yung mga sinabi natin, yung mga sinabi ni Secretary, yung mga sinabi ng aking tukayo, para totoo na malalaman nila yung katotohanan. So, sisiguraduhin ko na maintindihan ako ng mga kasama nating, kapwa nating Pilipino, no? Na andoon sa mga critical na lugar. Maayong hapon, kaninyong tanan na akong mga igala diha. Bisag asa mo, naragsak nga malam kanyayo amin. Ayan mo tata. Kasapulan nga ma-digest, ma-discern ang tanan nga gi-explain ni Secretary, gi-explain ni Tukayong Fred. Okay? Malikalikot yung nga mo si kayo namin dita nagagi. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Ang programa, first time ko to na sumama dito sa lugaw ng Kaalaman. No? At ang programa, akala ko technical eh. Akala ko napaka-technical. Pero sa salita ni Brother Fred, sa salita ni Secretary, nagsimula sila. Mga engineers tayo, dapat magaling na tayo, di ba? Technical. Magaling tayo dyan, no? Pero ano yung kailangan natin? Una, sabi nila Lenny. Ano yung Lenny? Di ba? Lenny, leadership, learning, di ba? Engagement with whom? Sabi niya, engagement sa laylayan. Di ba? Engagement sa laylayan. Ano pa yung end? Di ba? And then, ang pinakadulo na matandaan ko is integrity. Integrity ng who? Hindi lang siguro ng ating leaders, but tayo mismo. Okay? So, walang question sa technical. Pero ang sunod was, tingin ko, napakaganda na nabuksan yung mga bintana, yung mga pinto, para doon sa mga kasama natin na nasa labas. Okay? Nabuksan yung mga bintana, huwag kayong tumalon sa bintana. Nabuksan ang pinto, lumabas kayo sa pinto. Makikita nyo na sana wala kayong takip sa mata, tingnan nyo yung katotohanan. Yung truth, real truth. Sabi mo sa akin, siguro, ano yung katotohanan na yan? Anong pakialam ko diyan, no? Pare ko, kuya, ate, no? Bisag unsa ka, engineer ka good, or Ilocano, or Bisdak, no? May pakialam ka, no? Lalong-lalo na o higit pa kung ikaw ay tunay na Filipino. Ako, nakaranas ako na bilang isang anak ng magsasaka. Mga hindi nakatapos ng elementary. Isang estudyante, nag-iisang estudyante of course. Nalulong sa panahon na tayo ay malakas ang loob para magsalita tungkol sa ating mga karapatan. Natama ako sa panahon na ang campus ay very active ang mga estudyante. Ngayon, ako isang senior citizen of the world. I would say that because all this time, magte-testify yan si Robert Licop, mag-testify yan si Eric, and probably some of the engineers who are listening now. I saw Sunny from Singapore. Okay? Magte-testify yan that we've been trying to become the engineer citizen of this world. Alam niyo kung bakit? Pinopromote natin ang capabilities ng mga engineers. Not only in the Philippines but even outside of the Philippines. Kaya yung tanong ni Professor G, pinipilit namin po na kami ma-representa natin yung mga engineering professionals. When I say engineering professionals, hindi lang engineer, pati technologists at saka technicians natin. So, yung karanasan na yon, 57 years, I would say, alam na alam ko pa yon mula 1965. No? Kasi ang tatay ko, isang magaling na magsalita. Hindi siya politiko, pero tuwing may magka-campaign sa amin, siya yung kinukuha mag-campaign sa ilang bayan sa amin, sa Pangasinan. No? Marami akong naranasan. Katotohanan lahat yon. Pati yung pag-offer or pagbigay ng pera para lang baguhin alas 12 ng gabi bago eleksyon para baguhin ang ating isip. Okay. So mga kaibigan, yung mga nakikinig, dahil sa katotohanan na nadaanan ko na hindi galing sa Facebook, hindi galing sa Twitter, hindi nga galing sa trolls. Kaya ako kayang gumawa ng desisyon para sa aking mga anak, mga apo, at para sa kanilang mga anak. Higit sa lahat, tulad ng aming pinaglalaban nila Bob Licop, nila Eric, at marami pang mga presidente ng organizations, civil, mechanical, electrical, and so on, metallurgical, mining. Okay. Na ito naman siguro, dahil ito'y tinatrabaho namin na tawag nga nating mga abogado pro bono, di ba? Pero tawag naming mga engineers, tayo mga engineers, anong tawag natin? Trabaho na puro abono. Okay. Hindi pro bono. So ngayon, ito'y ginagawa namin para sa nag-iisang bayang Pilipinas. Pagtingnan nyo lahat yung sinabi ni Secretary, bakit siya nag-isip ng ganon? Bakit niya inisip na pagandahin ang DPWH? Bakit niya inisip na kausapin yung pinakamababang mga mamamayan sa laylayan ng ating bayan? Dahil lang gusto niya makasama lahat yun, no? Para sa ikaunlad ng ating bayan. At yon sa aking paningin, yung pagkakataon na yon na ang kasama lahat, no? Inclusive growth, yung kanyang 5-5 and 5, I think 5-5 and 5 eh. Kasi yung 5 hours pa ni Secretary, no? Kasama yon sa 5. And of course, yung 8 na minention ng ating tokayo, okay, na good governance, pagka-ikumpara yun kasi sa katotohanang pinapalabas, parang hindi tama. Ano yung katotohanan ng pinapalabas? na yung pagpila mo nung unang panahon, nung ako'y bata, utusan ako ng nanay ko at tatay ko, pipila ako para bumili ng bigas. Ang bibilhin mo pala, buong maghapon ka nakapila. Ang bibilhin mo is kalahating kilong bigas na may amoy pa. Di ba? Na may amoy pa. At yun ay kiniklaim na isang golden age. Hindi ko alam kung ano yung golden age. Yung palaging takot ka na pwede kang ikulong at pwede pang mawala dahil lang sa ikaw ay nagsasalita ayon sa iyong karapatan, iyon ba ay isang golden age? Ang paggawa ng struktura o anumang kailangang gawin para sa kapangananan ng nakakarami ay dapat gawin ng yan sa poder. Pero pinagmamalaki na ginawa. Pinagmamalaki sa ginawa. Sabi nila, hanggang ngayon nakikinabang. Pero ang tanong, ilan ba ang binigay na sakripisyo hindi lang nung mga tao nung panahon na yon, kung hindi hanggang ngayon para magawa yung mga yon. At totoo ba na yung ginawa na yon ay mas malaki ang sakripisyo kaysa pakinabang ng mamamayan? Okay. So sa akin, Kuyang, i-address ko to sa mga nakikinig sa labas lalo na. Kuyang at Sing, Manong, Manoy, anong kaalaman kailangan nating malaman? Yung katotohanan. Marami ang nasabi yung ating mga speakers. Ang isa dyan is yung tamang paggawa. Tayo mga engineers, palagay ko, yung tamang paggawa, pagka totoong engineers ka, medyo perfecto yun. No? Tayo kasi exact, no? We use exact science. Pero merong isang nakakaano dyan. Tamang pananaw sa paggawa at sa kagawain. Ito ay nagsisimula sa individual, no? Pero mas nakakatulong na may tunay na katuwang ka sa mga gagawin mo. Yung pamilya, yung kapwa engineers at iba pa. Palagay ko lahat yun na cover ni Secretary at ni Tocayo. No? That is what respect, meaningful engagement. No? Meaningful engagement of those whom you are supposed to serve. At yun, paggawa na nakakatulong hindi lang sa pansariling kapakanan kundi paggawa para sa kapakanan na nakakarami. Kasama na rin ikaw doon, no? Ikaw na isang engineer, ikaw na isang nakikinig diyan sa labas, no? Ako, tayo, pamilya. Ang pamilya mo, pamilya ko. Ang mga apo mo, apo ko. Yung mga bata ngayon, yun. Ito ang kapakanan ng Pilipinas, mga kapatid, na tingin ko nakadefine very well doon sa mga sinabi ng good governance, ng mga konsiderasyon na kailangang gawin ng isang totoong mapagsilbi, totoong gobyerno na hinahanap natin. No? Ngayon, mga kaibigan, mga kapatid, Kuyang, mga adsing, no? Siguro lumabas na kayo sa pinto. At paglabas nyo sa pinto na yon, sabi nga nila, isipin nyo mabuti. Siguro yung isip hindi masyadong maganda yung term. Yung discernment, i-discern yung mabuti. No? Because discernment is nothing more than the ability to decide between truth and error, right and wrong. At sana when you do the discernment, isipin nyo mabuti na yung bang nakikita nyo mga katotohanan? Ang motibo ba ng isang tao na nagpapakita ng pogi, lahat ng pogi points pinapakita niya sa iyo, ang motibo ba niya talagang ganun para ba sa isang misyon na malinaw at adhikain na para sa Pilipinas? Ang kanyang pinanggagalingan ba ay isang makatao Ang pinaghuhugutan ba niya ng kanyang mga adhikain ay yung tunay na pangangailangan ng ating bansa, ng ating mga tao? Ginagawa ba niya ang kanyang sinasabi? O kaya pagtalikod mo, iba ang kanyang ginagawa? Matatag ba siya sa kanyang paniniwala, makadiyos, sa tamang paggawa, sa sariling paniniwala ay makakatayo siya dahil alam nyo, alam natin na yung isang taong yun ay may tatag, may katapatan, hindi lang sa kanyang sarili, kundi katapatan sa bayan natin. At isang lagi kong naririnig ay yung isang tao na bumababa. Wala sa, ano yung tawag nila doon? Glass palace, bumababa, nakikinig, nakikipag-usap para malaman ang totoo, para malaman ang katotohanan para sa ikabubuti ng bayan. Isang tao na gumagawa. At tingin ko mga kapatid, ito lang. Ito lang yung ang tatay ko, sabi ko nga, balik ako ang tatay ko, isang malaking persona yon na pagdating sa mga ganito election. Pero ako, I never participated in elections except when I ran for the student council in high school. Okay? So today, I think, sabi ko nga sa mga anak ko, pag hindi tayo, kung hindi ako magsasalita ngayon, kung hindi ako kikilos ngayon, kailan pa? Kung hindi ako sasalita, sino pa? Ako na may nalalaman, ako na may naranasan, then forever nadadalhin ko yon kung hindi ko sasabihin ang katotohanan. So mga kaibigan, kayong mga nasa labas, napakinggan nyo ang sinabi ng ating mga speakers, ng ating mga reactors, sana po, pag-isipan nyong mabuti, i-discern nyong mabuti, dahil tingin ko, iisa lang, ang pupuntahan natin kung magkamali tayo. Iisa lang. Pero ayokong sabihin yun, dahil ang gusto kong makita is ang kinabukasan na anong tawag dyan? Kinabukasan na ang kulay ay rosas. Yun ang gusto kong makita mga kaibigan. So sino man kayo, alam ko may mga kaibigan tayo na nakikinig galing sa labas. Sino man kayo, sana po discern it very, very well. It's 30 days from now. And I hope we will have a Philippines that we can be very proud of in the next 20 years. Salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Magandang hapon.